your body's going to start absorbing that, and it's an amazing antibiotic.
Wow.
But being able to sit in the sauna and diffuse it while you're in the sauna?
You know, Sean, all synthetics, all pharmaceuticals are basically mimicking plants and flowers. But what's the difference between a synthetic and the actual? It's that it's the energetics, it's the life source.
All right, guys, got Robby from Therasage and Clayton from the Root Brands here today. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, great to be back.
Yeah, we're about to dive into some fun topics.
Welcome to Miami.
Yeah, Miami is very humid, you know? We're just talking about water, though, and how a lot of people don't know what's actually going on with water. You guys explain how water operates, I guess?
There's a lot to it. You know, people talk about the spiritual aspect of what we are and intelligent design, but the planet that we live on is 70% seawater, 17% silica, and a mixture of other components, and the human body has the same consistency, 70% water, 17% silica, and a mixture of other components. So it's interesting. And then when we look at physics, and understanding that physics is something that's actually applied, it's not something that you just kind of study in like math. But there's an underlying secret to EMFs and water, that seawater or salt water actually blocks EMFs, right? So when we have these different conversations on electromagnetic frequencies and their negative effects and some types of negative EMFs, there are good ones. I think we're going to hit on some of those.
Yeah.
But the negative ones are actually not resonant with the human body if the body is actually healthy and clean. But we know that you can't put heavy metals or aluminum foil in a microwave because it ends up poorly. The same way that if you take those same electromagnetic frequencies and you have aluminum in your body, it's going to resonate. It's something that if you've got mercury, lead, and aluminum in your system, which we all do because we're conceived with them now, that you might become reflective to the sun. You might get a sunburn. You might have all these other issues. And it's not the EMFs that are the problem. It's the fact that you're polluted the same way the environment's polluted. So
wow, it
opens up a unique opportunity. And then the resonance of your body, once you start cleaning those things out, then you become more resonant to doing good things, and like infrared.
Yeah.
I think we have that expert.
And you have a solution on that one. Yeah. So my take on the water piece is that has to do with the way cells communicate. And so basically, I think, in theory, we kind of get sick on a cellular level and we heal on a cellular level. So things you can do to support cell health is really a short and long-term play in terms of health. And so sunlight, and this is, like I always search for the deep science between why clinically all of the infrared applications we make work. And what I discovered from Gerald Pollack, he wrote a book about 9 years ago called The Fourth Phase of Water, back to that topic. And he discovered that there's certain rays of infrared spectrum that actually restructure the water in the world. But as to your point, if we drink a fair amount of water, we're probably 72% water. Our brains are like 81% water. Cells are like 98% water. So it's the transport system that brings everything into a cell, allows a cell to methylate or operate properly and get byproducts out. And you need to have structured water, which means you need to have earth energy and sunlight in order to structure the water so cells communicate properly. So EMF is a big part of it because, to your point, metals are all around us in our food sources, air supply, it's in, chemtrails and things that they're putting into our environment. And so a metal by nature is a carrier of electricity and these energies. And so when it's directed properly, then we got cell health. When it's misdirected, then we've got a breakdown.
Wow. That's scary.
I know. And I think that it's endemic, it's not just the US, it's a global challenge that we're having now.
Yeah. I had to change the water I drank because I got a blood test. My heavy metals were just skyrocketing. I ended up looking into the water I was drinking, and it was LA tap water.
Oh, yeah.
In a glass bottle.
Wow.
Well, it's interesting when you look at sources. Like you're in Vegas. I've got a colleague that's in Vegas, and he's lost 120 pounds, I think, in his journey over the last year, I think, working with one of the biohacking experts. And it was funny talking when I met him. It's like I've lost 120 pounds. I'm doing great. And he's got full blown alopecia. He's like, I'm healthy now. I'm like, bro, you have full-blown alopecia. All of your hair fell out. This is a problem. You're talking about this as a problem, then you're talking about how you're healthy.
If you're building something, doesn't matter if it's a business, a brand, or just a better version of yourself, then you already know the work never really stops. Your brain is always on. Ideas at 2 a.m., problems at 3, plans at 4. But here's the truth. If you never shut down, you're going to crash fast. That's why I use Sambrosa. It's not hype. It's not some trendy sleep hack. It's a legit syrup that helps you fall asleep when your brain won't let you. You take it and 20 to 30 minutes later, you're out. Not groggy, not drugged up, just to sleep like you're supposed to be. Then you wake up clear with no brain fog, no dragging yourself out of bed, you get your hours in, and you actually feel like you slept. Sleep isn't optional, it's not self-care, it's strategy. If you're not getting it right, you're leaving energy, focus, and money on the table. Sambrosa helps me sleep, it helps me execute, that's the only reason I talk about it. You want to get ahead, start by getting real rest. Check out the link below in their website, www.sambrosa.com.
So he starts to explain, what his diet was like, what his lifestyle was like. He's like, yeah, I started eating a lot of tuna and, because I needed a protein source, and he's in Vegas. So he makes a ton of money in gambling and doing different stuff. And he gets to go out and eat different stuff. And so what kind of tuna are you eating? He's like, yellowfin or, ahi. Great. So one, you're already loaded with mercury because I can already tell from your personality type and everything that you're dealing with. But then your diet and your lifestyle has amplified that. And so we did a urine excretion analysis because if you're doing blood work and you're showing high and heavy metals, you are acutely poisoned to them, right? You're constantly being exposed to them because blood, like Robby was talking about, is a transport medium, right? So it's something that is circulating through your system to be the mechanism to feed everything. But we did a baseline urine analysis, so not using anything to provoke any excretion of toxins other than just him doing it naturally. And he was extremely high in cesium and mercury. And he's like, well, why cesium? And when you go back 20 years, you have to be the old guys like us in order to know this. When Fukushima melted down 15 years ago, the radioactive cesium and strontium that were dumped in the Pacific Ocean radiated the entire Pacific Ocean, which means the food supply from the plankton all the way up are completely irradiated. But the two primary radioactive isotopes that were dumped into the ocean were cesium-137 and strontium-90. So he's eating a bunch of Pacific tuna that is showing with his diet, he's excreting even high levels of cesium and mercury. Wow. So then we put him on a little clean slate, for a couple months and actually cleaned almost all of that out from seeing, it was I think it was almost a six or a 10-fold reduction in his excretion. But seeing these things, and this is not science fiction anymore, it's science fact. What Robby's career has been, 30 plus years now. And what mine's been about the same time of, working in integrative health in humans and animals. And understanding that there's clickbait, to talk about different subjects and, whether it's nicotine or MTHFR, but you have to talk about them properly. But if you go back to the real science and the real foundational keys to, human health and human performance, it's actually really simple. The equation's quite simple. But it's a matter of cleaning house, right? And then being able to build on top of that. Because the same thing in your home. If you have a cockroach and a rat problem, you don't have a cockroach and a rat problem. You have a cesspool in your home that creates the environment for that pestilence to exist. If you clean your house, they go away. They'll find a different location because they won't exist in a clean environment. Yeah. And that's the key now is that we exist in a world that's completely poisoned us from the time that we're conceived. And now, what we're seeing is the magnification of all those symptoms. And Pharma's built an entire business model on understanding what the underlying causes are, right? There was a phenomenal case study compilation that was published in 1970 by the World Health Organization before really they were hijacked, that they published at the time that 85 to 90% of all chronic degenerative disease was caused by mercury alone.
Wow, mercury alone.
Mercury alone. And mercury is the worst neurotoxin known to man. It's the second most deadly chemical known besides dioxin, which is what they made Agent Orange with. So when you take the one factor that is something that disrupts every system of the human body, but it will also amplify the negative effects of all these other environmental toxins that we're exposed to, some of which didn't even exist back in the 70s, the PCBs, PBDs, PBDEs, all these different chemicals and glyphosate and such that have been introduced into our environment. Mercury actually amplifies the negative effects of them. But they
Shout out to Northwest Registered Agent, today's sponsor. Starting your own business should be exciting, not overwhelming. I've been there and I know how fast things can get complicated. Imagine getting it all done, your entire business identity in just 10 clicks and 10 minutes, seriously. With Northwest Registered Agent, you get more privacy, more control, and real experts who've been doing this for nearly 30 years. Whether you're launching an LLC or starting a corporation, Northwest forms your business for just $39 plus state fees and gives you the support you need every step of the way. If you need a website, a local business address, trademark protection, they've got you covered, all in one easy account. And here's the big one. You could protect your identity by using their address instead of your home. Want more? Their premium mail forwarding gives your business a professional presence while keeping your personal info secure. Don't wait, protect your privacy, build your brand, and set up your business in just 10 clicks and 10 minutes. Visit northwestregisteredagent.com/social hour and start building something amazing.
understood that if you never address the underlying cause and you have that builds up in your body and it's going to damage or disrupt every single system of the human body, but do it differently in every individual, it's going to create different types of symptomology. That if you have different symptomology, you can create a different diagnosis and you can come up with a treatment mechanism, maybe pharmacologically, to treat symptoms, but you're never going to address the underlying cause. And you always know there's going to be a progression of symptomology, which is going to lead to additional treatment.
Right.
It's a great business model.
Phenomenal business model.
You can make trillions doing that.
Can't deny that.
Yeah.
But then being able to address the cause, right? And then allow the body to come back into balance, and then working, on every aspect of the human body. And I think this is the important part: is the physical, the psychological, the spiritual, and the emotional, all being simultaneous. And understanding cellular health, the key aspects of cellular health. And we are light beings. That's a proven fact. So like Robby and I having our relationship, God, what has it been, 20 years now?
Yeah, right.
We're old. of
Our
understanding
worlds
the
collided,
principles.
and we haven't stopped,
Yeah. You guys have the same mission.
It pretty much, and so we're running in a parallel path, and it's just amazing. Clayton's brand, Root Brands, he's actually addressed like all of these challenges one by one, has taken them apart. And it's kind of interesting to see the synergies of the way that our technologies work together. So, to your point, I was just thinking, as you were talking about Mercury, because the dental industry is so plagued with Mercury and the amalgams, and we had done a deep dive on Mercury detoxing, like the best ways to pull it out. And he has his clean slate.
Is the best.
Is by far like the bottom line on just an easy way to integrate it into your lifestyle. Simple, affordable, and like it'll keep you really on track, with what's going on for everybody that's in the conversation. What intrigued me, and I was talking to Hal Huggins, started biological dentistry. He's passed now, but he passed on all of his work to a gal that we were part of a club with, and she invited us to a private dental symposium in Florida. There were about 30 biological dentists from all over the world. One of them, which was actually in Cali, and he started like the political movement against amalgams, pulling mercury out. So what she did was she took these like little gauze pads, and so she has one of these biological Hal Huggins approved, sort of orchestrated surgical center in her practice, taking out the amalgam. So there's proper ventilation, there's these dental dams, they call them, and all that stuff. She put these gauze pads like in front, next to, and behind. She measured the mercury gas that just comes off from taking out an amalgam on the pads, and it was much higher than the acceptable human level.
Dang.
So now think about this. They're putting these amalgams in your mouth, and it's still being done today, okay? When the dentist scrapes off all the scrapings, they take those and they put it in one of these boxes that has a big red cross on it and a skull and bones, and that's like hazardous waste. But yet this is sitting in your mouth, okay?
If it hits
so
the floor,
the scrapings go into hazardous waste, but
That's
yet they're in
crazy.
your mouth. And so this is the kind of exposure we've seen it recently, like with lead in somewhere, I guess it was in Detroit area, where they found the heavy metals in the water.
That was Flint, yeah.
Yeah, Flint, because they're breaking down all the commonly used pipings that in many of these industrial buildings and regular commercial buildings. and it's getting into every aspect of our lives. And so I think, to your point, the only way you can survive is to be a little detox conscious in your lifestyle, like incrementally, not just like wait until you get sick. You have to start at a base level. We have to educate the parents, and the kids have to grow up in a home where they understand like an infrared sauna and using, the clean products that Root Brands makes, particularly the zeolite derivatives that pull out these heavy metals. It's so essential and such an inexpensive way to stay on track with your health, so that you can actually grow up, being conscious, being vibrant, living the life that we're supposed to be living, You
hit on something that's really unique, because you hit on Flint, Michigan, and that was something that people became aware of for a brief period of time, and then it was set aside. I was working with a PhD researcher. He ended up in Australia, but he was American and went down there to do research and ran out of money. But he published his PhD thesis was on lead in the environment. And what was interesting is lead in the human body does 3 unique things: decreases IQ, increases rates of unwed mothership, and increases rates of violent crime.
Wow.
So what was crazy with this is when you overlaid the map of the United States, and if we were to look at the population centers of this country that have the highest rates of unwed mothership, highest rates of violent crime, and we won't use the IQ aspect, but you take those 2. And then you could look at a demographic of the United States where those 3 things are most prominent, right? And then you look at Detroit, you look at Chicago, you look at DC, you look at Baltimore, and you look at Atlanta and the Deep South, and the data shows that they have higher amounts, really high levels of lead in the environment.
Holy crap.
So when kids are out in the summertime playing in the dirt and kicking up dirt and having fun the way that they're supposed to, they're actually inhaling more lead. So it's not just in the pipes. So when we look at how these environmental components have played into different populations and different cultures, right? And the same thing with our Native Americans when they were put on reservations. If you overlay the amount of mercury in the environment in the United States, the land that was provided to our Native Americans on the reservations that they were forced onto are extremely high in mercury. So we've environmentally poisoned different demographics in our country just based on their environmental exposure. And you look at that impact and how that's impacted different cultures. And
it's mind-blowing.
It's crazy because once you start getting into not just the science, but the real impact of how we've been manipulated in different ways, right? But we've had the truth readily available, but we haven't really talked about it, right? Because it's not bourgeois to hit on what the real problems are. One, you're going to get pushback, and especially with Christina's background, with where my better half has been in her career. 20 years in biotech and now 6 doctorates, and being at Bristol Myers Squibb 25 years ago, working on mRNA research with HIV. So knowing what the real data was on mRNA vaccines. And going through this process and losing a child to cancer, having a brain tumor, having a spine tumor, having multiple kinds of skin cancer, losing a kid to cancer, and her journey of when she was diagnosed with Lyme disease when she was 19 years old and lost her memory.
Dang.
Craziest thing, she was one of the first cases of Lyme's disease in the country. 15 years later, when she's in the biotech industry, they're talking about the work that they were doing for weaponizing ticks and fleas and mosquitoes. And she's like, hold on a second here. I have Lyme disease and we're talking about doing this. And they're like, well, we did that in Europe. We didn't do it in the United States. And she's like, she's working on the projects, military projects that she was exposed to. And when it came time to take care of her health as a mom and as a woman, she then started looking at not the pharmaceutical options, but what was in nature and how to apply the aspects of bioscience engineering to nature and how to amplify what's already been given to us. But that's been the core, right, of everything that we've always needed is always here, right? It's the beautiful dichotomy of intelligent design. right? That everything that we've ever needed throughout history, God's already put here. It's just figuring out what time it is in order to use something. If we're out in the woods and you run into poison oak or poison ivy, right? There's actually a fern that grows right next to it that if you take the seeds underneath it and rub it on what you got from poison ivy, it'll
Really?
remediate it.
Wow.
It's crazy that in nature,
There's
that
the balance.
that balance is already there.
I used to get poison ivy all the time as a kid.
Yeah.
And had you known that the fern that was right next to it, you just go, okay, we're good to go.
Yeah.
But it's this interesting component of now the connectivity of society, right? And you've captured a lot of that, in the social platform that you've created, of being able to create an educational platform, being able to tap into the aspects of business and society and content and creativity, and being able to blend those all together. And that's where, like, Robby and I have worked with, of being able to create the mechanisms based on different areas of approach, and understanding that the key in business in today's world is all about collaboration.
Yeah.
Right. And marketing and advertising actually doesn't need to be done the way it used to be.
Agreed.
Right. And this is the sociological experiment that I kind of wanted to test 5 years ago when we were launching Root, because I built an algorithmic fintech ecosystem all around social commerce. Because I got to watch Amazon be born, Costco be born, from being in Seattle, and Starbucks and Microsoft. But what was interesting of using Amazon as a case study, when Amazon first launched and selling used books out of a garage at a loss, my mother and my grandmother were some of the first customers, and my mom was buying books, and then she started telling her friends. And then you started to see something organically take place where people were like, hey, if there's a good service, I'm going to use it. And they didn't spend money on advertising initially. They didn't have to, right? And now, as any business is typically going to spend 40 to 50% of their revenue, their top line revenue, on advertising and marketing to inject back in to drive more top line revenue.
Right.
But what if you didn't spend it on advertising? What if you spent it on people? What if you knew the value in what you were doing as a company or as a provider? With your podcast, the value that you're creating is for your audience, right? And when something goes viral, it goes viral not just because of an algorithm, but because somebody watches something and they share it with their friends, or they do an activity and say, I like this and I'm going to promote it, or I'm going to comment on it, and that's picked up. That's massive value, right?
Yeah.
The key in this then is how you monetize it. Don't feed the beast, feed the people. Because if you own a business and you're producing something, we could have a restaurant, we can do infrared and everything that Robby's been working on. We can do nutraceuticals and some of the stuff that we do. If you provide a service and you create quality and you create value, you will have consumers. And they'll do two things. If you continue to create value, they will continue to buy from you. They will also share with their friends for one of two reasons. If stuff works, one, they're going to tell their friends because they're like, I'm having this experience, you got to try this.
Right.
The other part is their friends will look at them and say, what are you on? What are you doing? Something's changed. At that point, there's this exchange in value. There's a creation of value. Companies should invest in that. And that was really the key part of blending the health and social aspects and creating a mechanism that puts money into people for the value that they create, because that's going to allow this whole thing to shift. Right? And it's been the one interesting component of the content that you've been producing for years now, listening to interviews, and you have all these entrepreneurs that talk about, oh, I made this much money. I built a 9-figure business doing this. I'm like, great. Over the last 5 years, I've put $85 million in people's pockets.
Yeah.
And it was watching something grow from zero to doing over $150 million in revenue, and knowing that the advertising, every single dollar in advertising that we really spent actually has gone to people that created value.
I love that.
And watching that grow.
What's really interesting is, like, one of our mottos, again, parallel paths, is people over profit. And everybody talks about that organic growth, like tapping into that source. So someone telling someone. And so that's what we've experienced in our exponential growth. It's having devices, harnessing nature, bringing out the best in all of us. So it's got to work. That's the first part about it. But when things work, like, either your friends see it in you, or you can't be quiet about the experience that you're having because you want to share it with the people that you love. And that's what we're all searching for. It's kind of the holy grail in many ways. We have an interesting chemistry when you talk about collaborations. Like, it's not just the concept, it's got to be the right people and like-mindedness. And there's got to be some synergy between the things that we're doing. Like we have the independent strength, and we also have the power of combining the things that we're doing together and that impact on the people that you're touching.
Right.
And I think that's where he really, really moves the needle. We live in a world of disruptors. Mostly it's got a negative connotation, like how can I upset the trend? Well, the trend is impersonal. And what we're talking about is bringing people back into the equation. So it's sort of counterintuitive that we're disrupting the current trend because we're actually honoring the individual and their growth, their families. And I think it's sort of the truth about stuff. It always seems to rise to the top on this stuff, Sean. And we're feeling that independently. And we also feel it with the combination of things we're doing together.
Are you saying that we're communal and we're pack animals, but we're not made to be a one-man wolf pack?
I was thinking community when he was talking too.
And that's the crucial aspect. And when you look at social influence, the real value, especially in an environment of NIL now, right? Of these kids thinking that, oh, I'm of value, I want to be a social influencer. And when businesses, because I have some athletes that we're working with in different aspects and working with their management and having this conversation of what's your real value, or even people that think they're social influencers and they're not valuing their social influence correctly, right? Because we could look at your metrics, and if we wanted to talk business, right, we'd say, okay, you have this many followers, and based on your followers and your engagement, you would have to find the aligning brands and say, okay, here's how you would value this. And usually in business, someone's going to say, okay, I want X amount of money to post this or talk about this. There's always an imbalance, and there's always been an imbalance of looking at the real value proposition in that, right? But if we look back at the GOAT and from a marketing standpoint and say, if you put up numbers, right? And this is where old school guys like us, there were no deals. You had to produce, right? It's the Jordan rule, right? But when Jordan got his Nike deal, he'd already done enough in college to know that this dude's different. Yeah. And when he was putting together his shoe deal with Nike, what did he do? He said, look, I don't want all the money up front. I know what I'm worth. I want a percentage of revenue, and I want it in perpetuity. Michael makes $300 million a year over year right now because of what his brand has developed and what he's done with Nike. Right. So when you look at that, if you're someone of influence, and here's the secret, we're all of influence, right? My favorite philosopher wrote in her first book that we are each an imperfect piece to a perfect puzzle. So we're already all connected. That's the divinity of what we are. We're 6 degrees from 6.5 billion people.
Crazy.
Right. So when you look at it, if you understand your value proposition, do you value yourself based on who you're connected to, or understanding that we're already all connected? So if you create value for your community and you can create engagement with your community to engage with others, that's a massive amount of influence. And from a business standpoint, it's a massive amount of revenue that can be created, right? You can look at a couple different social media channels, yours being one, and a couple other podcasts that people know if something is talked about or promoted on there, it's going to get traction just because of the audience.
Right.
The key is, one, being able to track that. But what if you're able to have a mechanism that not only tracks the influence from the primary content creator, but then also through that community that follows it and where that influence goes, and it's tracked and rewarded all the way through. It's been the one thing over this last 5 years of work of watching that take place, of having content creators or someone of influence have a personal experience and be able to share with their community and have their community engage with them. It's the most powerful mechanism we've ever seen. I've got one of my coolest case studies is a guy that makes 15 pounds an hour in London as a security guard for events. And he's a millionaire now. Not because of his direct influence, but because he had a good experience with Clean Slate and then told some friends who ended up telling friends who had friends of major influence, and it watched this spread. But because he started this cascade, it's the philosophy of throwing the rock in the pond and watching the ripples.
Wow.
And the ripples were more valuable than the initial splash.
That's awesome.
And it's being able to track that and show it and apply it. And then you get the aspects of understanding physics and see how it applies in the rest of the world. Of that ripple effect is the butterfly effect that people talk about.
Yep.
And
one of my
I think
favorite
it's
movies.
all about being authentic, right?
Yeah, that's winning these days, the truth.
Yeah.
People don't like let's just be honest, Hollywood actors aren't as famous as podcasters now.
Right.
Like people love the truth.
Yeah. And that's why, like for us, we don't really buy advertisers. Like we want you to try our things and just give us your real feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So, we can see in science that clinically things work, but because we're complex people, but the way back to healing is generally a pretty primal road, pretty simple. I think that the advertisers, like everybody is looking for a single root cause, but we're kind of complex individuals in general. And so generally it's a combination of things that, is part of what makes us individuals. But so unraveling that, can take a little bit of time. But to start with strong building blocks, like harnessing sun energy, we do, harnessing earth elements like what he does, putting that chemistry together, and the combination of that is pretty primal.
I bet.
Water, good food source, which is a challenge now. Nathan Bryan is a top specialist in harnessing nitric oxide.
Yeah, he's been on the show. That was a fascinating topic.
He did a study, though, I don't know if he covered it, that where he went to like 10 cities and Whole Foods and just measured like 8 ounces of broccoli in all the cities.
And they were all different, right?
Yeah. And so the food sources the ground is depleted now, doesn't have the proper organic minerals and bacteria and so forth. And so you're buying expensive organic food, but you're not getting the nutrition. It's kind of a false, I think that leads towards understanding that you need to do or offer or consider plant-based supplementation of sort and using the kinds of things that Root Brands is putting together in order for you to really bring out and allow your body to be in harmony.
Mm-hmm.
Things that are sourced properly. Yeah, I think that's the big flaw, because I heard you talking before, when you go out to eat, what kind of food sources you're eating. Right. And Christina's working with the Human Genome Project right now on the microbiome, and they're looking at the gut, because what we've seen over the last couple of years is even in women between the ages of like 18 and 40, they've seen an over 70% increase in colon cancer.
Damn.
And it's interesting because one of the areas of highest increase is vegetarians and vegans.
That doesn't surprise me.
Right? But the data shows, and you're hitting on seed oils, and the omega-6s are a huge, huge piece to this, that the issues with colon cancer have a couple different applications. Some people have a genetic predisposition towards some colon issues, but you have like a little damage and a little scarring that can take place in your colon from whatever. And it's the healing process and the scarring process. And if you have these other inflammatory cascades that take place from these different omega-6s and other toxins, cause the inflammation of that. So you've got fungus that'll grow around it, and then it'll grow. And that's the tumor.
Wow.
Right. So what was the freakish part of this is she's working with, like, I think there's 3 or 4 doctors that are part of this group, and I get to participate because I get to talk to her. And the 2 primary major issues for colon cancer right now are probably going to shock you a little bit.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Grass-fed beef.
What?
Grass-fed butter.
Oh no. I eat these things all the time.
Right?
I know.
Because we think that these are the healthiest versions, right? But if we know that glyphosate's been put in the environment since 1974, right? And it exists pervasively. So it's not just that farmers are continually using it, that you've got a water-based substance that has been sprayed on crops, it's gone into topsoil, it's gone into the water supply and recirculates. So it's raining down upon us, it's in the water supply, it's in the soil. And over 95% of all of the grassland, all of the farmland in the United States is loaded with glyphosate. If you have cows that are only consuming grass, the biomagnification of glyphosate in their tissue versus an animal that's also being fed grain is going to be amplified. So that which we think is most healthy right now is actually some of the most toxic.
Oh my God.
Interesting.
But
that just messed me up.
Here's something that is really, really cool.
I spend so much extra on grass-fed.
I know. Everybody does.
Yeah.
But if you're in Vegas, right, because you have options for restaurants, and I have my favorite places that we go in Nashville, right? My favorite steakhouse is when Christina and I get to go out and eat. And I only eat one kind of steak now.
Which one?
Which is A5 Wagyu. I love olive fed Wagyu beef because you only need a couple ounces because the nutrient content is so amazing comparatively. There's a secret that the Japanese do with their beef, with their cows, that no one else in the world does. And A5 or Wagyu beef has become really popular. You hear people talk about, oh, they're grain finished, they're given beer in their grain, they're massaged every day, they're treated really well. So you have American, quote, Wagyu, you have Australian Wagyu, but nothing compares with the Japanese version. The Japanese actually use an additive in their beef in their food supply. I had to look this up because I figured there was a clue, but I wasn't sure. And it's not talked about, and it's really interesting. They put an additive into the feed supply of their beef that solves the biggest issue, which is what we use to make clean slate. And it's actually a big conversation now, finally. I've been studying this for 20 years, but it's finally coming about. You hear the term zeolite used a lot. Asbestos is a zeolite, quartz is a zeolite. You have bentonite as a zeolite, clinoptilolite, others. Clino is this very unique crystal. It's what they use to make kitty litter, right? So it's the funny part of what this crystal is, kind of like in Indiana Jones, when you got to choose which cup Christ drank out of.
Yeah.
And it was the ugly one, right? It wasn't the pretty one that had all the jewels on it. It was the ugliest one sitting on the side that it's like, no one's going to pick that one. So when we look at this class of crystals and clays, these zeolites, and you look at quartz is the pretty one. Well, if you grind up quartz into a powder and you consume it, it's toxic. The ugliest one of the group is the one that is the most powerful. So what the Japanese will do is they'll take powdered clinoptilolite. So they have good sources over there, as well as the source we use to make clean slate, which is actually the best in the world. But they take the powder and they'll add it into their feed supply for the cows. It is that one additive that is not done in the United States that detoxifies the cows, decreases their nitrogen intake, and actually is clinically proven over the last 30 to 50 years to increase lean mass and increase yields in pork and cows.
Wow.
So they're actually detoxifying the animals while they're growing them to make sure that they're clean, right? So if you look at the Japanese culture, they're pretty smart in this, right? Because they know that they're not going to poison themselves. So they're doing the one thing over there that is not done here. So when you go eat and you have real Japanese Wagyu beef, you only need a couple ounces of it and you're full. Your body feels amazing versus eating other beef sources. Your body's going to resonate with it differently because of that toxicity and because of how they're sourced. So it's interesting of seeing how science is actually showing us what's in our environment, what's already proven scientifically, some at the highest levels of science right now that are not talked about, not published. But then there's the pseudoscience of what a lot of people are promoting on social media that is not true. I had I'll give Esai a shout out because the next Mission Impossible movie's coming out. Esai's a homie. And he called me right before we got on here. He's like, look, does nicotine dissolve glioblastomas? I'm like, where did you get that? He's like, well, there's this guy on social media that's selling these nicotine pouches. And I'm like, I've not met him in person, but he's a failed chiropractor. And no, that is not true. It's like, no, nicotine does not dissolve glios. And he's like, well, that's what he's promoting. I'm like, why are you asking me this? He's like, well, my makeup artist was just diagnosed with a glio. And, glios are pancreatic cancer is bad. Glioblastomas are the worst. And when you have a cancer diagnosis, you kind of look for anything. Right. And unfortunately now everybody starts hammering you from all of these different locations because everybody's heard of something and everybody wants to help. And it's nice having a wife that's had multiple kinds of cancer and gotten rid of all of them, but happens to have been an adjunct professor in oncology and hematology at Hopkins. And understanding the real science of how to address these components, but knowing that there's the truth in what's really going on and the foundations for what's been known. Yeah. Right. And then there's a lot of the hype, and we've got to get rid of the hype, get back to honestly the basics of understanding what we really need to do. And we get those clues. And it was when Robby and I first met. You understand the importance of sunlight and how the body resonates with it. Yep. We need sunlight, but in order to resonate properly with what God's given us, one, you've got to remove those toxins that allow your cells to become more resonant. but then having amazing sources that give you the tools to be effective when you can't get enough sunlight. And I will, God, how long has it been? It's been 10 years.
20, yeah, I was going to say
10 years that I've had the saunas. Like his saunas, just being able to sit in a tent, and instead of having a box that you have to build in your house, but being able to sit in a tent and just watch TV or hang out and know that you're getting what you want and you can move it where you want. You can build things into your lifestyle. But the key in this is understanding that each of us is unique, right? That we're beautifully created, and the most important thing you have to do is know thyself, right? Plato, I think it was Plato that said it the first time.
Yeah.
First, know thyself, right? So you have to take the time to learn who you are. You need to understand your genetics. It took us 2 years to develop the genetic panel that we have. That's got six separate panels built within it. So it's not just an MTHFR test. An MTHFR, for everybody that wants to talk about MTHFR, is not about taking freaking B vitamins, right? The methylation pathways pertain to how your body really will convert and work to flush things out from a detoxification process. Here's the secret to MTHFR. MTHFR and your genetic predisposition towards methylation also has ties to Down syndrome and sickle cell trait. Kind of crazy.
That is
that
nuts.
Sickle cell trait and Down syndrome have the same cause. And the interesting part is when you look at autism and you look at endocrine disruption in girls, you have more boys that have rates of autism, but girls will have other endocrine issues later on in life. It's because of the effect of mercury. Because very, very early fetal developmental exposure to mercury. So when a mom becomes pregnant, when that sperm and egg come together, her body starts to create life. But at the same time that her body is then using everything it can to create a baby, it's also using that same placenta as a receptacle for all the other toxins in her system, because it's going to push all of these things into that ball.
Wow.
Which is why women miscarry so much. But very early fetal developmental exposure will cause damage to different chromosomes. So you can have Down syndrome, right? So that's why we know that women over 40 having a child for the first time have these higher rates and higher risk for Down syndrome. It's because they've built up 40 years of toxicity. And if the first baby survives, the likelihood of having chromosomal damage due to those environmental toxins can cause Down syndrome. Interesting part in our genetics that if you take someone of higher levels of melanin, right, that same influence won't cause Down syndrome. It can cause red blood cells to lyse, which causes sickle cell trait. But then when you apply it to exposure into a fetus that survives, you've got this buildup of toxicity that a baby's born. You don't know what the body burden is at that point. And then sometimes you have a tipping point of maybe already based on the environmental exposure in the fetus, you're going to see developmental issues. But then if you're adding additional toxins into that baby, it could be through breast milk. It could be through what they're injecting into kids. And I'm not anti-vaccine. Are you anti-vaccine?
I'm trying not to be political on a political show.
So,
but I do think it's an issue.
It is an issue.
Yeah.
I'm anti-adjuvant. So granted, my wife was 20 plus years in biotech, and she's probably been vaccinated more than anybody on the planet because she's been to 92 countries. The problem is not a lot of the vaccines. Now, the vaccine schedule is way out of whack, but we can get into why that happened with Obama and the Affordable Care Act, because he's the one that created this cascade and this chaos, and the reason that the entire pharmaceutical industry has gone the vaccine route. That was all done with one decision he made. Intentional, possibly, but unique. The key in this is understanding that if you do what was done in the UK in the 90s, you look at the data, and because they have universal healthcare over there, so their economy doesn't run on pharmaceutical companies and healthcare companies making billions and billions of dollars off of sick people. They're paying for the healthcare of their population, so they want healthy people. What they saw was this increasing spike in neurological issues in kids, and what they traced it back to was the preponderance of the use of multi-dose bottles of vaccines, not not the vaccines themselves, but the adjuvants are used in them, aluminum and mercury, which we've already hit on. So why would you inject mercury and aluminum into kids or anyone? That does not make sense because you have insane neurotoxicity that comes from those. So if you use a single dose ampule and you don't need the adjuvants, you can just use whatever components you're using to make a vaccine, then you'll have better outcomes and you'll have a decrease in risk of these neuro issues and all the other complications that come from mercury and aluminum exposure. So RFK, you want to solve the problem and you don't want to get screwed over by the pharmaceutical industry, let's just wipe out multi-dose bottles, make the pharmaceutical industry start doing single-dose ampules. And if you're a parent and you want to fight the system, demand that if you're going to vaccinate your kid, one, spread them out, do your research. A lot of stuff probably isn't needed, but demand single-dose ampules. Don't use a multi-stick bottle. Here's why. Multi-stick bottles usually have 10 doses in them and they add aluminum and mercury into them as adjuvants because you have to make sure that they stay sterile. And it's funny that mercury kills everything, which is why they use it, but it's also a heavy metal. So imagine you've got a new bottle that sits on the shelf and the nurse takes it, puts it in the fridge because the doctor's going to use it. And it's sitting on the shelf. The nurse grabs the bottle out, sticks a needle in it, takes the first injection, puts it in the kid, puts it back in the fridge, takes it out for the next kid, draws, sticks a kid. You got 10 of these. But at no point do they shake the bottle. Guess what the 10th kid gets?
What?
A lot of mercury.
Oh, God.
It settles down.
Because it sits on the bottom because it's a heavy metal. This is why they call it the 10th kid theory. And if you look at the statistics on our rates of autism, what they've done over the last 30 plus years is what they're expecting in a few years is we're going to be 1 in 7.
Well, the numbers are crazy.
Callie just said 1 in 20, right? Or 1 in 12.
Right. They keep decreasing. But the interesting part of what's not talked about much is you have this increase in rates of autism in boys. But mercury will affect boys and girls differently. You don't see a lot of diagnoses in autism in girls.
That's a good point.
But mercury is also hormone mimetic. It's estrogen mimetic. So what do we have now? We have 9-year-olds that are starting puberty, right? We've seen these in the preponderance of mercury and these other environmental toxins that are all also hormone mimetic. We're seeing physical changes in female biology where the vagina is actually moving back towards the anus. The taint is actually getting smaller.
Wow.
Which for like one of your people that was having the conversation about anal sex in girls, you're like, well, both spots are in a better location now. But we're changing, our biology is actually changing because of this toxicity issue. So we're seeing the effects on both sides. People in medicine are talking about the autism risks, but we're not talking about the endocrine, thyroid, health risks in girls as well, because those issues don't show up until later on. Right. So we have these complications. We're about one to 2 generations away from not being able to breed.
Oh my gosh.
So when you look at that, we are in the midst right now of a literal extinction event. Our species is not going to exist in a couple generations if we don't address these things.
Yeah, I know Zach Bush talks about it takes 3 or 4 generations before the effects of any change actually hits. So we're in the 3rd generation now of the stuff that's happened. We haven't really seen the impact
of
yet.
Vaccines, or
of all of it.
Yeah, you know, I could listen to you forever.
I like
listening to you, right? But the common theme here is the environment and the way that our bodies are responding to the toxic exposures.
Yeah,
and really, if we're trying to look for healthgevity, you know, just
I like that word.
Yeah, but just kind of like not just living longer, but living a meaningful life, a purposeful life, which I think is part of what we all deserve in Earth Camp, I call it, while we're here on the planet.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just think that you really need to kind of consider now, for the first time ever, paramountly, that to just create a model in the house and outside that addresses the toxic burdens that we're exposed to.
Yep.
Unfortunately, some of them we can't see, hear, taste, or smell. That's the EMF issues. I was listening to you on the whole beef thing, like in the US, the beef market, you use steroids to beef up the beef. And then they have, the Asian culture, Japan, that wants to clean the beef so that it actually is more bioavailable. That's why you don't have to eat a lot to get the nutrition. And on glyphosate, and you're going to love this because you're a basketball player.
Yeah.
Doing some research with a guy who's like smarter than me. And he understands the mechanism of the way glyphosate, we know that it's causing leaky everything these days, not just leaky gut, like most of the major organs in your body, your brain, your spinal column, your heart, they have sacs around them. And they all have these same cells that are called tight junctions, which is kind of like a dike. And so glyphosate causes those cells to separate. That allows in your gut undigested food and bacteria to go from where it belongs to leak into your bloodstream. Sort of creates that horrible chain called autoimmune diseases, which are basically these, it's not really foreign because you've got digested food and organisms, but they don't belong in your bloodstream. And so the body's got a natural immune response to that, which creates inflammation and a lot of things that, again, back to Clayton and his wife, the genius of what they've done is create solutions for all this, which is, answers, which I think is what we're all, affordable answers, which is what we're looking for. But as a ball player, what happens with glyphosate is it turns into glycine. And what that's doing, it's attacking the soft tissue, your tendons, your connective tissues, the fascia. And so what we're seeing in clinics now is high school kids that are tearing their ACLs. That should never happen from just playing normal ball.
When we grew up, those type of injuries didn't exist. I tore my ACL in high school because I ran into a kid playing softball and blew my knee up.
Yeah.
But you see this in girls, you see this in boys, and you see this in professional sports now. You see guys popping ligaments and such and hamstrings. And it all comes down to that aspect of, even the most elite, when we look at athletes, they're unique genetically in their predisposition, but the environmental aspects that they are around still have an impact on them.
Yeah.
You just might see them in different aspects.
Yeah, and so what's happening is biochemically, because we're exposed to this glyphosate issue, it's in our air, water, and food now in trace amounts. It's changing the biology and the biochemistry inside of us. And these soft tissues that are supposed to be elastic, it holds everything together, are now losing the elasticity and actually can snap.
Wow.
And that is a big deal.
That's scary.
And so it's not just taking like a collagen supplement that will support that. You actually have to do things to detox and shift you back and get those chemicals out of us in order for us to maintain that vibrance that we need.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's super key.
So a little truth on glyphosate, because I'm not sure if you've had a chance to talk about it on the platform much, but to simplify it greatly. And I was able to work with Don Huber, who is the foremost researcher on the subject since 1976. He was such a is it proponent? No, he was against it. He was one of the primary professors of agriculture at Purdue, and he was so against it, they retired him early and made him a professor emeritus because Monsanto was dumping so much money into Purdue to do research. But plants and humans and the rest of the environment that we live in, we're not far off genetically, right? We are connected to the leaf on a tree the same way that we're connected to the person that's next to us, right? That symbolism has been given to us in movies, right? You watch Avatar and it gave us the understanding that everything is connected. You can look at it as this massive bioelectrical mycelial network. But glyphosate is really unique in how it was designed because it doesn't kill weeds. It gives plants AIDS.
What?
That's the mechanism. So what glyphosate does when sprayed on plants is it decreases their immune system through the shikimate pathway, but it's basically giving them AIDS. So the microbes that are in the soil kill the weed. Glyphosate doesn't do it. It weakens the immune system and the functionality of that biological mechanism and allows the environment to kill it.
Wow.
Now, do you think it doesn't do that in humans when humans consume large quantities of it over an extended period of time? It's absolute. So when you look at this cascade that we're dealing with, and Robby's dead on, and it's why we are simpatico in our approach of taking the physical aspect of being able to go in and have little green garbage trucks start scavenging what's in the system, but then what we do assists the pathways of what he's been doing for 30 years of understanding how to use infrared and how to use light, and especially from a sauna standpoint, doing it correctly, of allowing the body to start sweating. I watched a video you just did yesterday of doing the essential oils in the sauna.
Oh,
bro.
I know.
I'm doing this.
Cool,
Christina was actually doing this in an interview.
I never thought of combining those two at the same time.
Oh, you have to watch what he just put out, because they've got it's an ionizer, right? Or it's a diffuser that you put in the sauna. And Christina was actually doing a podcast about this yesterday, because when she has Lyme, she's had cancer.
Yeah.
And when she flares, she'll take oregano oil in a cup and some sea salt and put it in a bath.
Yeah.
Now, if you've ever played with oregano oil, you know it's the strongest antibiotic on the planet, but this really good oregano oil is hot.
Yeah.
And it will burn you.
Damn.
My wife puts this in the tub and she's like, if you can stand it and you can sit in it for 2 to 3 minutes, it's amazing, because it'll start drawing stuff out, because your body's going to start absorbing that, and it's an amazing antibiotic.
Wow.
But being able to sit in the sauna and diffuse it while you're in the sauna.
Yeah, it's great. Sean, all synthetics, all pharmaceuticals are basically mimicking plants and flowers.
Or an extract thereof.
So you look under a microscope, it all looks the same under a microscope, but what's the difference between a synthetic and the actual? It's the energetics, it's the life source. When you pull a apple off of a tree or a carrot out of the ground and you eat it right away, it has a whole different, we're organic beings, we're living beings, and now it's a living fruit or vegetable.
Mm-hmm.
And that organic energy is so important. Those live enzymes, the active ingredients, real active ingredients, not just what's written on a label, makes all the difference in the way that your body will potentiate. Your cells will actually be healthy and get that energetic,
Yeah.
These guys live and breathe this. This is their psychology and science behind everything that they do. What we've done is we kind of look at it from just a different road to Rome. And so when we use the sauna, I created it in my brain like a wagon wheel. So the sauna being the hub, and then the spokes being different things you can bring into that experience. So in 30 minutes, you can change your life, right? And that's what addresses today's lifestyle. And you can do the sauna in your home. I think you probably have one of our things.
You sent me one.
You check it out.
I use it all the time.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Changes your...
Did he get a bigger one because he's so tall?
No, it's amazing. We've had someone 6'9". So you're like 6'5" or
6'6", yeah.
6'6", yeah, I was going to say. So, I mean, and you're not feeling confined.
No, I feel good. You sent me the chair to put in it. Sitting down, I'm working through the arm sleeves. Working on my phone.
Well, sweating is one of the top most efficient detox pathways. We have a couple of big ones. And so when you get, there's two kinds of heat. There's what's called convection heat. That's like a hot rock sauna or a steam room. And that's heating the ambient air that heats and touches your skin. But underneath your skin, you've got a thin layer of, for some people like me, a little bit thicker layer of insulating fat, which protects your inside from extreme temperatures. Well, that fat is the first thing that touches through your skin, which is a breathing organ. Environmental toxins come in through your skin. You're bathing in fluoride water and chlorine and all these chemicals that we accept to be in modern science or modern cultures to be okay. It's really not, but it's coming through your skin. Now it's being captured by your fat. And eventually starts to leach into your bloodstream. And this is part of the toxic problem we have everywhere, and not just what we read about. Well, let's reverse that. So now you're in sauna, and infrared uses what's called radiant heat. So it doesn't heat the ambient air. It actually penetrates through the water, which fat is about 75% water.
Wow.
And so it penetrates through because it harmonizes, actually resonates at the same frequency as the water inside your body. That's why, that's one of the hints that Gerald Pollack taught me about structured water, and there's the way that infrared is so impactful in the body anatomically. And so now we're creating this vibration, which is the radiant heat. It actually it's called bioresonant. It vibrates through the water, that protecting layer. It liberates, mobilizes the toxin that's sitting in that fat molecule, as well as stuff that resides in your cells, your tissues, your organs. And it brings it in either into your bloodstream if it's inside, or actually in your fat molecule, about 80% comes out in your sweat. And this has been measurable. They took I love the people that do these studies, Clayton. I mean, we eat this stuff for breakfast, he and I. But they took a guy and they put him in a hot rock sauna steam room and a infrared sauna, and there was 85% more toxins in the same drop of sweat from the infrared environment.
Dang, that much more?
85%.
Wow.
Dr. Patrick did an amazing study, and there's a Finnish study on the impact of sauna in the way that it'll help your life and well-being.
Well, the Finns have been doing saunas for, I don't know, the last 6,000 or 10,000 years.
Yeah, so that we're trying to, in a consciousness movement to try to actually bring a sauna experience into as a cultural event in the U.S. as it is in the Ukraine and the Baltic states. So they live and breathe sauna. They use that as a place to get together to sweat and talk about old times.
That should be more accepted in America.
Don't you think? That. Right? And so we're thinking that if I educate you and then your kids grow up in a house where sauna is just a normal event.
Oh yeah, it'll be in the house for sure with my kids.
Right? And then that's the way to stay clean, get a chance to kind of hang out together, and then go about your day knowing that every day incrementally you're detoxing, because every day incrementally you're getting toxic from things around us, you know? So the 80% comes out in your sweat, 20 goes the other way, 20% goes into your bloodstream. And plus you've got resonant poisons in your bloodstream, and you've got, in terms of infrared, we're mobilizing toxins inside of you. So that's the key with our marriage here, because we mobilize a toxin, he binds the toxin with one of his supplements.
Love it.
And is it a marriage or a bromance?
Both.
Okay.
And then that takes the toxic burden off of your liver, your pancreas, your large intestine, the other detox pathways.
Yeah.
And helps your body get rid of the poisons in an easy, organic way, which I think doesn't go against mainstream, allows us to work this stuff into our normal lifestyle. The importance is what we're doing today, just educating the community that people are watching to understand that these are affordable, it's easy. You really can't live a future healthy life if you don't consider having some of this stuff we're talking about part of your daily routine.
Yeah.
And it's not about the economics, it's about people over profit. It's about understanding if we make you healthier with these concepts, then you're going to live a more fulfilled life. You're going to pass that message on to your kids. People around you are going to see that. You're going to unite communities through health and kind of disrupt the direction that the mainstream consciousness has been taking us. I think that became a lot more aware during the whole COVID piece, where we became isolated. We broke apart communities. We broke apart families. We had a lot of time to think about, was what we were learning the right way?
That was the unhealthiest I've ever been during COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the problem is we came out the other side of the tunnel and we're fed the same BS that we got when we started the tunnel. So I think it's like a medium like this where we get a chance to actually challenge some of the mainstream thinking. Not that I'm not coming from a place of judgment now. I'm just suggesting there might be another way.
Yeah.
And I think through COVID, we came out and we just thought like, hey, there might be another way. Let's just consider that. And, you know, we're kind of healthy here. We're talking about, and we are healthy, but what about the person that's just been diagnosed and that whole industry scares you to death and says you get your stuff in order because you got 4 months to live.
What about usually not true?
Right. Yeah. What about, because 8 out of 10 people are misdiagnosed because the doctors aren't paid to ask the right questions anymore. Yeah. So they put the wrong label on people.
But they also aren't educated. And when we look at cancer, right, and this is a truth, that 80% of cancer is misdiagnosed.
Wow.
Because one, there's no effective test for fungus available in the market, right? And this is one thing Christina's gone over with me, and you can ask her when you do this. But the most testing for different types of fungus is 50% accurate, and actually for most viruses and everything, it's about 50% accurate.
Damn, it's crazy.
When you look at that, but in medical school, and I grew up in an integrated veterinary practice, so it was really, really fortunate for me from the time I was 2 years old to being in the clinic. But studying parasites and fungus as a kid and looking at fecal samples and blood samples and, you know, what was in it. But you have the aspect of what is a real tumor. But then you have fungal overgrowth. And this is something that Christina's been talking about for 15 years and doing research on, that fungus is our biggest issue. But fungal overgrowth in the human body is actually created by the dysbiosis created from the heavy metals and all the environmental toxins. And it's the fungal overgrowth that then creates absolute chaos in many different aspects. But that environment allows the growth of parasites. So you have everybody talking about parasites right now, but parasites are the downline issue. Like we were talking initially about cockroaches and rats. That's the parasites. If you change the environment and you clean up the environment, you don't have a parasite problem because you'll have homeostasis in the body, and the body will be functioning the way it's supposed to. So if you do these things, whether it's in your home, right? So you have your place of peace. So you've got your room, or you've got a sauna, and you can go relax, and you take care of yourself, and you're doing these very simple things to clean up the body, and you start to feed your body from a nutrient standpoint what it needs, because there is a massive difference between nutrient intake and caloric intake. We've been taught that we need calories, right, in our diet for energy and whatnot. We really don't need calories. We need nutrients, right? When we look at eating meat, right, you need the amino acid profile and the peptide profile that your body's going to break down to use to create muscle and create connective tissue. The problem is our food sources don't have the combination that we used to have. So having something that actually has all those aminos, peptides, HMB, phytoplankton, all those nutrients, and something that you can take that has virtually 0 calories, but has all the nutrient profile to give your body what it needs, creates a different pathway. And what Christina was doing in what she's created from a protocol with Root, each one of our products is strategically designed to address different aspects of what the body needs, but she built them really for us and our kids to live on. If we got to a point, if we were traveling, or if the food supply was so bad you couldn't get what you needed in your diet anymore, we're there, right?
Yeah.
That if you shift your focus, and if you really put the value on your health and well-being, and it's been interesting of watching this sociological study over the last 20 years, and having friends that have built businesses, and like we've done, that you watch people become successful and they sacrifice their health in order to make money, and then they get to exit, or they get to make a lot of money, and then the one thing that they want to do is buy their health back, right? Sometimes you can't afford that bill, right? Steve Jobs, didn't get a chance to pay the bill, right?
How about Jimmy Buffett, right?
Was it carrot or celery with him?
I forgot.
Carrot, right?
It's the funny part of what he was dealing with is such an easy solve.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the knowledge and you don't have the information, and if you put yourself in a box, but the interesting aspect of investing in your health, that healthy, happy people make more money, right? That's a scientific fact. So if you are an entrepreneur, and you're starting to see more people talk about this, because the knowledge is becoming well aware that the greatest investment anyone can make is going to be in people. It's in yourself first, but then it's in the people around you, which goes back to a business philosophy, right? Of the greatest investment anyone can make is in community.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where that authenticity, as you were hitting on, is so important, because that's what people want to see, that it resonates with us. That if somebody has their own personal story and that's what they're talking about, because our experiences are typically not unique. Somebody else is dealing with some of the same things, or the experience that we have that allows us to have our specific walk is what resonates with others, because they can learn from it. And understanding that the more that you invest in yourself, the greater the outcomes are going to be. And as you continue that process, you're going to create that foundation for other people to model. And the more you do, the better you're going to be. And we've put such a focus on monetary gain and having things. And I'm going over this with my youngest son, because as we were talking watches earlier, right? You're wearing a watch that actually has history. And my son is trying to tell me about Richard Milley. And I'm like,
how old is he?
He's 20.
Okay.
Or he turns 21 in a month. I'm like, 1 is Richard Mille. And 2, it's not about the accumulation of things, right? And once you've been through life enough and you've had successes, and you begin to accumulate those things that you've wanted, then you begin to realize that they really don't hold value.
Yep.
It's nice to have those things, but the real value is in what you can do with and for others.
100%.
Right? Yeah. Because one of the greatest things is being able to sit down with people and break bread.
Yeah.
And just have community.
Can't beat that. Those are my happiest moments.
It's the greatest part because those are the things you remember. You don't remember going out and it's like, oh, I wore that watch with those shoes and that was dope. It's like,
totally.
Sometimes it's nice to have them, right? To be able to coordinate with an outfit, but it's not something that you're going to think back when you're 95 years old and going, you know what, I remember that time. It was, you know what, I remember Robby saying this and this resonated with me this way. And then we were talking about that. It's bringing that back, but knowing that if you're looking at something that is designed to improve your health and your function and your overall well-being, and you're purely looking at it from an expense standpoint, take the step back to analyze what the value is in your productivity. Don't buy the bullshit, right? Do one, trust in your gut if it's healthy, because you have the resonance built within you to be your bullshit sensor. Yeah. Right. If it doesn't resonate properly, it's probably bullshit. Yeah. Especially on social media and the media now. If you look at it and go, well, just because I heard it on the internet might not mean it's absolutely true. Yeah, because there's a lot of clickbait. Yeah. There's a lot of people pitching shit to try to make money.
The best doctor is the one inside of us.
Absolutely. Yeah. When healthy.
Yeah.
When healthy.
Right. Yeah. And health is wealth. Absolutely. That's the bottom line. You know, of all the interviews, I don't know if it's just us, but you've been the quietest. Like you got a ton of questions. Yeah. So is there something that we haven't touched upon?
This has been great. You guys covered pretty much everything.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. I have an 80-20 rule on my show. I try to talk 20% of the time.
Okay.
Yeah, I highlight the guests. You guys have done incredible though.
So with your experience thus far, and you've had thousands of people you've been able to interview. 1,500 people you've been able to interview so far. When it comes to the health or lifestyle aspect, what are a couple things that are the topics or the subjects that you've had the most interest in that you say, what about this? Are there a couple things that pop out the most that have led to the greatest questions you've had thus far?
That's a good question. For me personally, just the infrared sauna changed my life, I think.
How?
Yeah. Just noticeable. Like I never had a detox method before it. And whenever I use it now, I just feel incredible. Yeah. Just getting tested as well. That's a good first step for people, whether it's blood, urine, or whatever. See where you're at. Because I feel like a lot of people are just guessing.
Yeah.
Right.
And then they'll see like a trend online, like methylene blue or whatever's hot at the moment. And then they'll start taking it without knowing where they're at.
Who wants to turn their brain into a Smurf?
Yeah.
You know, the other thing about this too is that what we've noticed just from working together and just in our own clinical approach is that the sequencing, like the way that you stack the hacks that you're doing can make a difference in the result. And also the individual dosing, because people have a tendency to get drawn into what's on the label. Yeah. But you have a unique biology. We all do.
It's true. Yeah.
And so, how do you measure what your body needs? One hint could be the deficiencies that show up in your blood tests. I kind of like muscle testing and have learned how to do it myself so I can actually understand what my body needs in a certain supplement of whatever it is. So I know I need to supplement, but how much of that do I need at any given moment? And your biology changes. I mean, you've got a chemistry inside of you that is measuring, like your internal chemistry every trillionth of a second. Yeah. And constantly balancing that. And then we've got the whole epigenetic piece, like what the environment and our natural proclivities, our choices that we're making and how that affects us. And so to kind of dial that in a little bit and understand that you can take an individual approach, like look at like the landscape, go with trusted brands, people that are really have the scientific studies behind it.
When it comes to supplements, I only buy third-party tested these days.
Yeah,
I'll spend the extra money on it.
In my area, like now that like red light and infrared is becoming a little bit more popular, which I'm enjoying because I think everybody should have it. Yeah. Not necessarily our stuff. I think we take a unique approach, but you got companies that go to Alibaba and slap their label on it and try to undersell or actually charge sometimes too much money for it. With no science behind it. There's no backing. The company doesn't stand behind their products. And I think the consumer gets kind of duped into it.
Some EMF in those saunas, I heard.
Yeah. And red. I mean, all red lights the same? Really? Not really. So, I mean, the LED that we developed is we call it a trilite because it's got 3 different wavelengths in every diode. So I'm delivering 3 times the amount of light energy directly into your cell. And because we are very EMF conscious, meaning that our devices don't deliver any EMF, so there's no conflict on an energetic level when you put our devices right on your body, which normally most other purveyors, because there's no real controls, there's no agency that says, in fact, even in the cell phone industry, the two U.S. regulators are the FTC, the Trade Commission, and the FCC, the what is that? The consumer?
The FTC and the FCC, Federal
Communication.
Because of the frequencies.
Yeah, and you know,
they don't do much.
You know how many health-minded people sit on those panels that actually set the standard for regulation?
And they're all from the big phone carriers.
Well, Sean, close your eyes. What do you see? That's how many. There's 0.
Oh, yeah?
So it's all economics. It's not driven by health at all. And that's our responsibility to come up with solutions, like come up with answers that the consumer can easily buy so that they can enjoy the technology but not deal with suffering of the health aspect of it.
Absolutely.
You're hitting on the key underlying issue in all of this. When if we look at the supplementation aspect, right? And I'll use supplementation as anything that you're looking to add to the body. And this is where Christina's work is so important. That we know this from a cooking standpoint, that it's not just the ingredient, it's the quality and the source of the ingredient. If you want eggs, you want farm fresh eggs. Preferably, you want eggs that the chickens have been given red chili flakes and from a store, so they're healthier and the eggs are bigger. But we know that there's a difference between really farmed, created, not healthy raised chicken eggs and just real farm fresh eggs, right? Yeah. We know that there's a big difference in sugar and different sources of sugar or vanilla. And you want Madagascar vanilla versus imitation vanilla. And if you took just flour, eggs, and sugar and said, make me a cake, you can make a cake. But if you use the wrong combinations of those, you're not going to have the right outcomes. But if you go source the best ingredients in the world of each one of those versus going to Walmart and buying the cheapest stuff, you're going to have a different experience. So when looking at the creation of things that you're going to put in your body, one, you better know the source, right? And when I say source, I mean where things are coming from and who's sourcing them and who's creating them, because the energetics and the intention of the individual that is creating that which you're putting in your body is really important. Love is the most important ingredient in anything. That's why every kid knows that a home cooked meal from mom is one of the greatest things ever, even if your mom can't cook, right? But she's putting her love into that for her child.
Hopefully not in a microwave, right?
Maybe. So when you understand that, when we look at curcumin or we look at vitamin C, right? The majority of vitamin C on the market that's being sold on shelves is loaded with heavy metals.
Damn.
So if you don't know the sourcing and the person that is doing the sourcing to make the products that you're consuming isn't the most diligent in cleaning and sourcing the highest quality ingredients, you probably shouldn't be buying from that source, right? The same thing goes in what Robby was just hitting on. You have someone working in tech that is not just creating something from a light standpoint. It's what he was talking about. One, it's identifying and understanding, because he's been doing this for like 30 years and probably a couple lifetimes before, which is why he's here doing what he's doing now. But understanding the specific frequencies of red light that need to go into that combination. Yeah. But it's then not just those frequencies, it's his specific intention of what he's made to do and why he's here that is being applied into that. So you're not just getting, oh, I've got these lights and this is on me. It's his specific intention and design of what's going into that and the resonance that carries forward of that is so crucial. So when you understand the value proposition in that's where you talked about having things that are third-party tested. And one, that should be all ingredients. Yeah. But then the combination of understanding that it's not just putting ingredients together, right? It's the strategic combination of specific ingredients and how they apply together, because as Terrence Howard was going over in some of his conversations on what he's studying in quantum physics, and had he and Christina talk about this because he's having issues talking about fractals and having things peer reviewed. He'll never get peer review because he doesn't have peers in what he's doing and the physics environment of all of these people, that their entire model is built upon him not talking about what he's finding. But there are experts that understand what he's doing. And it was fun listening to he and Christina talk. He's talking about fractals and some of the things he's seeing. And because she's a quantum physicist and a nanobiotechnologist and has been teaching like our kids about string theory and black hole theory 20 years ago, he's going over what he's seeing and creating some of these different technologies and different innovations that he's having visions and working with. And she's like, yeah, you're correct.
Wow.
Because they are speaking the same language and they're understanding where they're coming from, and they're looking at it from a different perspective. The same thing goes in what you're ingesting or what you're choosing to put in. You have to understand that it's not just, oh, I heard about this ingredient. You better find the people that know what they're talking about and know what they're doing, that then you can trust them. Because if you're not a bioscience engineer, you probably should find one that knows what they're doing and what they're creating to apply, right? I won't take advice from someone that's a 5th grade teacher, right? In most aspects.
Yeah.
If we're talking about education, you have your elementary school teacher, and then eventually you're going to end up going to college and university and maybe go to postgraduate school. And you have someone that has a deeper level of understanding of the subject matter versus your elementary school teacher. They're both educators, but they have a different level of education.
There's levels.
It's the difference in looking at computing, right? There's hackers, right? And you can look at a hacker of someone that's going to play with apps or get into passwords and do some things, and they'll configure software. But then you have people that understand the data fabric systems and built the data fabric networks for banking and at Microsoft and at Bay Microsystems, and that build off of the hardware and the operating system. The same thing applies into our health because we're a quantum computing system. We are the greatest biological computing system ever created. If you understand the operating system and the hardware and you build accordingly, if you're a bioscience engineer, you're going to look at the operating system different than someone who's a hack and a hacker, right? And this is the interesting part of where we are in this process, that you've got Robby, who's got 30 years of history. So he is the PhD in this subject. And we've got all these lay people now that are starting to learn. They're in elementary school and they're learning from elementary school teachers, maybe middle school, high school, right?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of the social media influence. And it's really important that you start your education, because you go to kindergarten, you go to elementary school, you go to middle school, you go to high school. And then as you become more knowledgeable and more aware of an environment, you're always going to work towards the most educated and the highest quality, which is that journey. The good part is when it comes to light therapy and infrared, we've got the dude sitting right here. Robby is that dude. So eventually, as you go down this path, you will find Therasage and you'll find Robby and go, oh, you're different. This works better.
We're in a paradigm shift, right? So that consciousness has a lot of momentum behind it.
Yeah.
We're early adapters. So we were thinking about this before it became
mainstream. Yeah.
Yeah. And so think about it, kind of a wave. We're sitting on the top of the wave, and now the wave is starting to move. There's a lot of momentum behind you. If you look at a surfer, he sits there waiting for that wave to come in. And then he sits on his board and then he catches the wave, and it's the momentum of that wave. That's the paradigm shift we're in right now.
Right.
And so we don't have to do a lot right now. We just have to continue to be pioneers and creative in our own ways with applications. But the shift of that energy and the consciousness now, brought by you, bringing this to your community, things like that, allows us to have kind of like that pathway to be able to communicate this kind of information to the people behind us.
Age of information, yeah. Age of Aquarius right now.
Yeah. And to what he's done is really unusual, because like Clean Slate, for instance, it's a binder. It catches nanoparticles, which I think are the most insidious. So if you look at the Detox sort of concept. It's like peeling an onion, Sean. So like the environmental toxins are like the outer layers of the onion. And so you got to get through that in order to get heavy metals and get the nanotoxins, the cytotoxins, which are the ones that affect our thinking. It's what I call a silt. And so infrared is one of the ones that technologies that the vibration will actually pull that silt and the heavy metals. Metals, have a ionic charge to it, and so does the silica derivative that Clayton and his wife have brilliantly found and perfected in their application. And so he has a particle, his clean slate, that has a charge to it, like a little magnet, and then there's the metal that has a charge to it. And so when you bring the infrared in, that breaks the covalent bond between the heavy metal and the tissue or the organ where it's attached to. It cascades into your bloodstream, where his formulation is sitting there waiting to catch it.
Wow.
And so, absent us not combining our techs together, I can stir up the pond, but the key is getting it out of your body.
I love it.
And so, because we're plagued with so many environmental toxins now, our detox pathways are overburdened. And so to take the burden off, combining a binder, a nano binder that they've perfected, and having that is easily absorbed, easily to move into, and I'm a binder freak. And so because like yourself, well, all of us, we're pretty active. So I take a binder before sauna because I know I'm mobilizing toxin then. But movement creates also mobilization of toxin. And so when you're playing tennis, pickleball, when you're going for a run, when you're playing basketball, if you're getting a massage, oftentimes you've ever done that and gone off the massage table and felt a little woozy.
Yeah.
Because he's pushing poisons that are stored in your muscles and your tissues out into your bloodstream, which circulate within 2 minutes up to your brain. And your brain gets like, what the fuck am I doing here? You get disoriented. So you need the binder to actually gather all of these poisons together to actually take the burden off of your filtering organs and help you actually get rid of it, actually push the poisons out. And I think that's the key.
Yeah.
Right now.
We'll link in the video, link to get the binder and Therasage as well. Anything else you guys want to close off with?
Yeah. What do you say? I don't know. We touched on so many good points
today. That was a fun
today.
episode. I learned a lot.
Back at you.
Yeah.
Thank you for creating the place for us to have a chance to.
The place of peace.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on, guys.
Look up.
The opportunity to collaborate, right, and come together. And I think this will be the fun part as we post some links. But working with your community and doing the test. One, try stuff, right? And you got some zero in. I live on zero, and the dopamine and serotonin aspect of this cascades. We look at detoxification and then being able to boost natural dopamine and serotonin production. But the one thing from a business standpoint is also having companies that put their money where their mouth is. And so I'll give you the real statistics of what we've done over the last 5 years, because we put a 60-day open container money back guarantee on all of our products.
Wow.
And what's crazy is being an online direct-to-consumer retail brand where the normal return rate is about 20%.
Damn.
Right? It's usually high for consumer brands. Ours is 0.3. It was amazing of just watching behavior, because we wanted to, I stand behind everything my wife creates because of what she's doing and how she's doing it. It's just like, hey, you know what? We know the stuff works, so let's just put it in people's pockets. But if you don't like it and it doesn't work, we'll give you your money back. But people don't return them because they work. and that was the fun. But being able to take this approach and really do a real sociological experiment of watching what community can really create. Because if we look at like having a sauna, right? And where a lot of people are economically, I mean, being able to spend money or finance, purchasing something for your house of, that's $500, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, however you put things together. Some people don't have the disposable cash right now to do that. But if you find brands that you like and that will invest in you, and you find things that you value, you can actually share with friends, create value, get rewarded for it, use those rewards to actually accumulate the things that you need in your home. It's understanding that you are of great value. And I don't mean just you, Sean, but I mean everybody that watches this, you are of tremendous value. because it's the content, it's our behavior that creates value for other businesses. All of these $1 trillion market valuations, all these tech companies are built on one thing, us and our behavior and our data. We're working on privatizing and decentralizing that here pretty quick, but that's really the key aspect of understand your value, right? Invest in yourself, and take the time to value yourself enough to understand the sources that you're buying from, and trust the people that you value. And I think that's the important part of the authenticity that I enjoy with the content that you're creating and the interviews that you do, because you have that authenticity. And your audience appreciates that as well, which is the reason they still watch what you do.
Yeah, I haven't sold out yet.
Yeah, exactly. And that's an important piece of knowing that building alignment with companies, with businesses, with other like-minded individuals that are all aligned, that are authentically coming together on those components, that you don't sell out. You don't have to sell out.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't have to start searching for the next deal.
That's the downfall of a lot of content creators.
It is. One because they're not properly monetized in the first place. Yeah. Right. Because businesses want the revenue. They typically want as much as they can get from you by giving you as little as possible. Right. But if companies understood that you can shift your marketing dollar, and we had to do it algorithmically, and if you create value, you should be rewarded. That's the bottom line. That way, no one's coming to the conversation with their hand out and their palm up. Right. It's not about what I can get from you or what I want. It's about how we can do this collaboratively. You have value, I have value, Robby has value. How do we put these things together? But it's also knowing going in that while the three of us are having this conversation, the real value proposition in what we're doing is the value and the benefits that we can create for your community. And then how we can strengthen that community and actually help them create value for their communities. Right. So you might say, okay, well, I've got a couple million followers, but everybody's got 10 friends. So if we go from 1 million to 10 million, and 10 million to 100 million, and 100 million to 1 billion, and then 1 billion to 10, and there's only 8 billion people on the planet, we're 5 degrees from everybody on the planet just from having these conversations.
Absolutely.
So, and that's the real power of the mechanism.
Yeah.
That if we collectively create, a mechanism for value, then everybody wins.
Beautiful.
I just want to thank you for giving us an opportunity to get together and hang with you a little bit.
It's been great, guys. We'll do a follow-up one of these days. We'll link everything below. Cool. Thanks for coming on, gentlemen.
Okay. I can't wait for you to talk to my wife.
It's going to be a fun one.
Thanks.
Check them out, guys. Peace.
All right.